So imagine you find a deeply discounted house during a real estate downturn.
Sure.
Right? You want to buy it, but you're worried about the risk. So you write up a purchase contract and you sneak in this little escape clause.
Uh-huh.
And this clause says the entire deal is contingent on the approval of your business partner.
Right.
But your business partner is your cat.
Right. The cat.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd, maybe even a little sketchy, but it's actually a very specific, calculated tactic used to build immense wealth.
It really is. And it completely flips the script on how most of us are taught to navigate risk, and opportunity. Because we usually think of contracts as this rigid, terrifying documents.
Yeah.
But for those who actually understand the mechanics of money, they're just tools. They're tools for leverage and protection.
And that is the exact shift in perspective we are unpacking in today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. Today we're looking at a comprehensive 23-minute read summary of Robert Kiyosaki's personal finance classic, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
A really foundational text.
It is.
Yeah.
And our mission for you today is to decode the fundamental difference between, working for a paycheck and making your money work for you. We're going to extract the most actionable insights so you can rethink your relationship with money.
And we're going to do it without drowning you in financial jargon. We're breaking down the actual mechanics of how this works step by step.
Exactly.
But, it is vital to establish right up front that this is not about some quick trick to get rich.
No, not at all.
The concepts we're exploring today, they fundamentally rewire how you perceive education, how you evaluate risk, and really how you behave around money. Because financial independence is rarely about how much you earn. It is almost entirely about how you think.
Right, the mindset. And to understand how to build wealth, we first have to look at how our baseline financial mindsets are even formed.
Yeah.
We get a very clear picture of this right at the beginning of the text, with a contrast between two distinct father figures in Kiyosaki's childhood.
You have his biological father, who he calls Poor Dad. And this was a highly educated man, a teacher, who eventually became the superintendent of education in Hawaii.
So, very successful by normal standards.
Exactly. But he operated on the traditional script, get good grades, find a safe job with a pension, and work your way up the institutional ladder.
Right.
He valued job security above literally everything else.
And then on the other hand, you have Rich Dad, who was the father of Robert's best friend, Mike. And Rich Dad took a completely different path.
A totally different path.
He didn't care for formal schooling at all. He was an entrepreneur who believed in self-education, understanding the tax code, and, mastering the concept of making your money generate more money.
And that contrast really becomes a catalyst when Robert and Mike, as young kids, get teased at school by the wealthier children.
Yeah, that's a great story.
They decide they need to figure out how to make money.
Yeah.
And they take that idea very literally. They start going around the neighborhood collecting empty metal toothpaste tubes.
Which were made of actual lead back then.
Right, so they melt the metal down in this makeshift foundry and literally start forging their own fake coins.
Until Robert's actual dad, Poor Dad, catches them. He explains that counterfeiting is highly illegal and tells them, look, if you really want to learn how money works, you need to go talk to Mike's dad.
Yeah.
So Rich Dad agrees to mentor them, but he doesn't, give them a textbook or a lecture. He offers them a job working in one of his convenience stores.
Doing manual labor.
Right, dusting cans and cleaning shelves on the weekends for 10 cents an hour.
Which, by the way, was a remarkably low wage even for that era.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because 10 cents an hour, that just sounds like child labor.
Yeah, it does.
Is the lesson here just to endorse child labor and frustration, or is there a psychological breaking point we all have to reach before we stop relying on a paycheck?
It's the latter, absolutely. On the surface, it definitely looks like exploitation. But the frustration was the intentional mechanism. Rich Dad was trying to force a psychological break. Well, most people are caught in this emotional cycle of fear and desire, and that keeps them tethered to a traditional job.
Right, the rat race.
Exactly. The fear of not paying your bills forces you to go to work. And then the desire for the things a paycheck can buy keeps you on that treadmill indefinitely.
Ah, I see.
By making the paycheck so offensively small, Rich Dad forced Robert to stop relying on the money. He broke the dependency.
Because it wasn't enough to buy anything anyway.
Right. And once Robert stopped looking for the paycheck, he was forced to look at his environment and spot the invisible opportunities that were already sitting right there.
And that shift in perspective actually works. Because once they stop obsessing over the 10 cents, The boys notice that the store manager is just throwing away unsold comic books. They ask the manager if they can keep them, and he agrees, as long as they don't try to resell them. So the boys pivot, they open a basement library, they hire Mike's younger sister to manage it.
Brilliant delegation there.
Right. And they charge the neighborhood kids a small admission fee to read as many comics as they want for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
They end up making significantly more than their 10-cent wage, and they don't even have to be in the room.
Because they moved from trading their physical time for a wage to creating an income-generating system.
Oh, yeah.
And this principle links directly to Morgan Housel's core argument in The Psychology of Money, which the text actually references.
Oh, right.
Successful investing is largely a soft skill based on your behavior, not a hard science of advanced math. Robert and Mike had to manage their emotional frustration before they could actually execute a financial strategy.
That makes so much sense. So if training your brain to spot opportunities is the first step, the next step is knowing the rules of the game. Like, what do you actually do with the money once you have it?
Exactly.
Which brings us to the Great Divide. This is the core framework of this entire philosophy: assets versus liabilities.
It really is the most critical distinction to grasp. The wealthy accumulate assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities.
But they think they're assets.
Yes. The danger is that the middle class often mistakes their liabilities for assets.
Right. And Kiyosaki defines these with just brutal simplicity. An asset puts money into your pocket, whether you are physically working or not.
Right.
So we're talking about dividend-paying stocks, bonds, intellectual property, or, real estate that generates rental income.
Yeah.
Whereas a liability takes money out of your pocket. Fancy cars, credit card debt, subscriptions.
And this framework explains the mystery of why high-income earners, doctors, corporate lawyers, professional athletes, why they often end up struggling financially or just going completely broke.
Because they buy too much stuff.
Exactly. They have immense cash flow coming in, but their expenses and liabilities scale right along with their income. They buy a larger house, a second luxury car, an expensive country club membership. They are still entirely trapped in the cycle of trading their time for money. They're just doing it at a much more expensive tier.
There's an incredible historical example of this in the text regarding Ray Kroc, the man who built the McDonald's empire.
Oh, yeah, the MBA story.
Yeah, so Kroc was speaking to a group of MBA students and asked them what business they thought he was in. And they all laughed and said, well, you're in the hamburger business.
Right.
Kroc corrected them. He told them his real business was real estate. The hamburgers just paid for the strategic land beneath the restaurants.
He was focused entirely on acquiring the underlying asset. Which leads us to what is easily Kiyosaki's most controversial stance in the whole book.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Your primary residence is not an asset.
People hear that and immediately push back because it violates every single piece of conventional financial advice we are given.
It does. But if we apply his strict definition, it makes perfect sense. A house you live in does not put money in your pocket every month. It constantly takes money out.
Right.
You have mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, you need a new roof, general maintenance.
Yep.
Money is constantly flowing away from you.
Right.
So it is a liability.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if you rent that same house out to someone else and the rent covers all those expenses and leaves you with profit, then it becomes an asset.
Let me try framing it this way for you. Think of every single dollar you earn from your job as an employee. Buying a liability like a massive TV or an expensive car loan is like taking your employees out back and firing them.
Ah, that's a vivid way to put it.
Right. But buying an asset, like a share of a solid company or a rental property, is like hiring those dollars to work 24/7 in a factory, printing more money for you while you sleep.
That is a highly effective way to visualize it. And the overarching strategy he proposes is actually very conservative regarding your day job.
Yeah, he's not saying just quit tomorrow.
No, he does not advocate for quitting your job to start a risky company.
Yeah.
He suggests keeping your secure day job, drastically reducing your expenses, and using your excess paycheck to buy assets.
And the rule for buying luxury items is really fascinating. He says you should never buy a luxury with your salary. You wait, and you buy the luxury only using the passive income generated by your assets. Like, he wanted a Porsche, but he didn't buy it with his earnings. He waited until his real estate investments threw off enough excess cash to cover the car payment.
The text draws strong parallels here to The Millionaire Next Door, pointing out that the average wealthy individual does not live in a mega mansion or drive a flashy sports car.
No.
They're often blue-collar business owners driving standard, reliable Fords or Toyotas. Wealth is the money you do not spend.
The summary also connects this to the richest man in Babylon, introducing the concept of paying yourself first.
Which is huge.
Yeah, before you pay the electric bill, before you pay the mortgage, you take a percentage of your income and direct it into your asset column.
But if the goal is acquiring those assets,
Yeah.
we have to look at how someone develops the specialized skills to do so, especially when society encourages us to just seek a steady paycheck.
This is the work-to-learn strategy. And Kiyosaki's own resume is completely baffling if you look at it through the lens of traditional career climbing.
It really is.
He deliberately took jobs just to acquire specific skills. He went to work for Standard Oil specifically because he wanted to understand international trade and shipping.
Yeah.
Then he left that to join the Marine Corps, flying helicopters in Vietnam, entirely to learn leadership under pressure.
And then Xerox.
Right. After that, despite being a naturally shy person, he took a job at Xerox just to learn how to overcome rejection and master the art of sales.
His highly educated father, poor dad, just couldn't understand why he kept quitting secure jobs with good benefits.
It broke all his rules.
But Kiyosaki recognized that working purely for a wage is a trap. You should work to extract knowledge from the marketplace. And out of all the skills, he identifies sales and marketing as the absolute most vital.
There is a revealing anecdote about an interview he did with a journalist who was also a writer. She was, offended by how commercial publishing is, and she asked him how she could sell more of her novels. And he suggested she take a sales training course. She was deeply insulted by the idea, feeling that sales was manipulative and, beneath her artistic craft.
Right.
But Kiyosaki simply pointed out that the cover of his book says best-selling author, not best-writing author.
He is entirely pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
He readily admits he's not a great literary writer. I mean, when he was publishing his first major book, he wanted to call it, "If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School."
Wow.
Yeah, his publisher was horrified and wanted to change the title to The Economics of Education.
A title that would have ensured the book sat in a warehouse forever.
Exactly. He knew the controversial title would generate free publicity, spark outrage on talk shows, and drive massive sales.
Yep.
The summary brings in a connection to Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography, Total Recall. Schwarzenegger argues that sales is not manipulation. It's simply making people aware of what you have built.
That's a great point.
You can have the greatest product or idea in the world, but if you refuse to learn how to sell it, it will die in obscurity.
But even if you have the skills, the text outlines 5 major mental roadblocks or wealth blockers that prevent people from taking action.
Yeah, these are insidious.
There is fear, the fear of losing money, even though every successful investor, including Warren Buffett, experiences losses.
Right.
Then cynicism, allowing the news cycle to paralyze you with pessimism, ignoring the fact that economic downturns are actually usually the best time to buy assets.
Definitely.
There's laziness, bad habits.
Yes.
And arrogance, which is the assumption that you already know everything, which ends up costing you dearly.
The cure he proposes for laziness is particularly interesting.
Yep.
He suggests using what he calls a little greed.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we're usually taught greed is terrible. It's, the root of all evil. Is Kiyosaki rebranding greed, or is he just talking about basic ambition?
It's a provocative word choice, for sure. But what he's really describing is intellectual curiosity and active problem solving.
How so?
Well, the most common phrase lazy minds use is, "I can't afford it." When you say that, your brain literally shuts down. You've accepted defeat. It lets you off the hook.
Right.
He argues you should train yourself to ask, how can I afford it? By forcing your brain to answer that question, you're demanding that your mind find a creative solution. It forces you to engage with the world rather than passively accepting your current limitations.
That makes sense. It's about mental friction, and that ties back to the habit of paying yourself first.
Yes, exactly.
If you put your money into assets before you pay your bills, you might come up short for your expenses. That deliberate pressure forces you to hustle, to find new creative ways to generate income.
He compares it to lifting weights at the gym. You're intentionally applying stress to a muscle so that it grows stronger. In this case, you're applying pressure to your financial intelligence.
Okay, so we understand the mindset, the rules, and the skills required. Now we need to look at the actual mechanics. How do people execute these ideas in the real world to accelerate wealth, rather than just waiting 40 years for a mutual fund to mature?
The text highlights a crucial difference between two types of investors. Most people buy prepackaged investments.
Like mutual funds.
Right. They hand their money to a fund manager. It's generally safer, but the growth is slow and steady. The wealthy operate differently. They don't just buy investments, they assemble them.
And the summary connects this approach to Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, emphasizing the concept of asymmetric risk and the grand slam return.
Yes.
Thiel famously made more profit from his single early investment in Facebook than from all his other investments combined. You are looking for the unique opportunity that the crowd has entirely missed.
And for Kiyosaki, the primary vehicle for this is real estate. The text details a specific transaction where he turned $20,000 into $190,000 of asset value.
This is the cat story.
Yes, the cat story. During a market crash in Phoenix, he found a foreclosed home worth $60,000 that the bank was willing to let go for $20,000.
And this is where that bizarre cat contract comes into play. He was making multiple lowball offers on properties, and to protect himself, he wrote a clause into the contracts stating the purchase was contingent on the approval of my partner.
Right.
And he reveals his partner was secretly his cat. So is the point here to be legally deceptive, or is this a masterclass in risk mitigation for the listener?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is purely about risk mitigation. It sounds absurd, but in the realm of creative real estate, it's an extreme example of how the wealthy use the precise, written rules of the system to minimize their exposure.
Right, because middle-class people aren't taught to write their own contracts.
Exactly. That clause gave him a completely legal exit hatch. If he locked up the property, inspected it, and realized the math didn't work, he could simply say his partner didn't approve the deal and walk away without losing his deposit. It demonstrates a level of creative contracting to control an asset without taking on unlimited risk.
So he uses this tactic, secures the house for $20,000, and waits for the market to bounce back. He then sells the house for $70,000 using a simple newspaper ad.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just take a $70,000 check. Let me make sure I'm following the math here. He sells the house, but instead of the buyer getting a mortgage from a traditional bank, Kiyosaki basically acts as the bank for the new buyer.
Precisely. It is a mechanism called seller financing. He takes a small down payment, and the buyer agrees to pay him the balance over time with interest.
Wow.
In this case, he held a $40,000 promissory note paying 10% interest.
So that means without doing any additional work, he is receiving $4,000 a year in completely passive income from that note. And he repeats this exact process 6 times. By rolling his gains forward, he ends up with $190,000 in paper assets, generating $19,000 a year in passive cash flow.
And to pull off mechanical transactions like that, you need what he calls financial intelligence.
Right, which isn't just one thing.
No, it's a combination of 4 specific technical skills. You need accounting, so you can read financial statements. You need investing, which is the strategy of money making money. You need market understanding reading, supply and demand. And crucially, you need to understand the law.
Which goes back to the contracts.
Right. He points out that he paid $385 for a real estate course early in his career that taught him the mechanics of buying property with no money down. That single course made him millions of dollars because it taught him how to operate within the rules.
And speaking of operating within the rules, we have to talk about the tax code. We spend so much time figuring out how to make money, but keeping it from the government is the other half of the equation.
It really is. And it's worth noting how Kiyosaki frames this historically. Income taxes originally began as a penalty on the ultra-rich. But as governments expanded and needed more revenue, the tax burden was pushed down onto the middle class.
Right.
However, governments intentionally write tax codes to incentivize specific behaviors. They want private citizens to build housing and create jobs, so they create legal pathways, often called loopholes, to reward people who do those things.
The text points out that highly paid professionals, like doctors or engineers, often end up paying the highest percentage of their income in taxes.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the wealthy use corporate structures. Can you explain the actual mechanism of how a corporation protects your money compared to a regular paycheck?
It comes down to the order of operations. If you're a standard employee, you earn money, the government immediately takes its cut in taxes, and you have to try and live on whatever is left over.
The standard way.
Right. But when you operate a corporation, the corporation earns money. It is legally allowed to spend that money on expenses, first things like travel, equipment, or meals. And the government only taxes what is left over at the very end. The order is flipped.
That is massive.
It is. Furthermore, corporations act as a legal shield, protecting your personal assets, like your home, if someone decides to sue your business.
But the most powerful mechanical tool we see in the text for accelerating wealth is something called the Section 131 exchange in the U.S. tax code. Walk us through this because this shows exactly how you can scale up your assets rapidly.
Okay, so the 1031 exchange allows an investor to sell an investment property and reinvest the profits into a new, more expensive property without paying any capital gains tax on the sale.
Wow.
You're deferring the tax indefinitely, as long as you keep rolling the money into a bigger asset.
You are legally bypassing the tax toll booth. The summary provides a very clear timeline of how he used this. He bought a small house in Portland for $45,000, putting just $5,000 down. He eventually sold it for $95,000.
Yeah.
If he had just taken that $50,000 profit, he would have lost a massive chunk of it to the government immediately.
But by utilizing a 1031 exchange, he rolled the entirety of that untaxed profit directly into a 12-unit apartment building.
Incredible.
And a few years later, he did it again, using the same tax code to trade up to a 30-unit building in Phoenix. Eventually, he sold that building for $1.2 million. By deferring the taxes, he maintained the full velocity of his money, allowing it to compound at an extraordinary rate.
It fundamentally changes the math on how fast you can grow your net worth.
Absolutely.
Well, the summary wraps up this deep dive with some rapid-fire advice for execution. You need to talk to successful people. Kiyosaki saw a woman in a tax office who invested in tax lien certificates, which is a way to buy someone's unpaid property taxes for a guaranteed high interest rate, and he simply invited her to lunch to learn the mechanics of a new asset class.
He also advises paying your professionals well, your accountants, your brokers, because good advice makes you money.
Right.
But ensure they actually invest in the things they're recommending. When evaluating any investment, the primary question must be, how long will it take to get my initial money back? And lastly, the principle of giving. If you want money, give money. If you want a smile, give a smile.
So how do you actually start tomorrow? For you listening, the text lays out a concrete path. First, you have to define specific written financial goals. Then you commit to continuous education, taking courses, reading market analysis. Next, you simply open an investment account and start practicing, even if you are only using a small amount of capital.
From there, you begin meeting with financial advisors to understand your options. You must start tracking your personal balance sheet, reviewing your assets and liabilities every quarter.
You're constantly checking the math.
Right. You practice mindful spending, forcing yourself to ask before every purchase, is this an asset or a liability? And you build a network of other investors who are actively doing what you want to do.
It requires an entirely different operating system for how you navigate the world, but it leads to a very profound realization once you actually achieve it.
It does, and it's something people rarely anticipate. If you successfully apply these mechanics, if you accumulate the assets, leverage the tax codes, and entirely replace your working paycheck with passive cash flow, you solve your money problem, sure.
Right.
But you immediately run into a meaning problem. If your basic survival is completely guaranteed by your assets, what becomes your purpose when you wake up on a random Tuesday morning? What will you choose to do with your absolute freedom?
That is exactly the kind of question we want to leave you with today. Huge thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Keep questioning the scripts you've been handed, keep analyzing the mechanics of how the world actually works, and we will catch you next time.